Hello there, Riverland, Long Prairie Grey Eagle. English major Jeff Johnson here on Saturday, November 14th. We are already at the middle of November. How is that even possible? Time has such a different quality these days. And let me get going here, giving you pretty much the stuff that I offered my 2 Comp 1s in Brainerd yesterday morning, Friday the 13th. But let me begin with the same story that I told them to try and illustrate at least one of the things I want to put before you. This is prelude stuff, not preview. I was thinking very fondly yesterday morning of 2 boys, a bunch of kids actually, that I haven't thought about in a long time. And the story hopefully will be illustrative of just kind of some stuff that's in my heart here in the pandemic, and related specifically to what it was like to host U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo virtually. And I should have mentioned I'm out here in my glass porch to try to, so it would look like I'm in the wild. I don't know if it's working or not, but I got some hibiscus flowers blooming here, and I know you can't see them very clearly because they're in my dreamy, fuzzy background with my deluxe camera on autofocus. But quick story. At my high school, and I'm looking through the woods at it, I always do that, don't I? It's about 3 miles to the east. In my old high school, I had this gigantic office, and it was always full of kids. It was like a literary salon. At least that's how the American poet Jory Graham put it. She was the last poet I hosted there. It was huge, and I filled it with furniture, and it was just kids all day long hanging out with me. It was like a 9-hour day. I was obligated to teach 5 of them, which gave me 4 open periods to hang out with kids. And there was a particular kind of kid that, it was a generation of kids actually that grew up in that office. And it wasn't the jock, even though I was a crappy coach of cross country. It was the nerdy kid, the geeky kid, the music kid, the theater kid. We were just kind of a year after year after year, a band of misfits. And even though I'm the devout Catholic, that was the office you came out in, man. If you were a lesbian or gay young person, you needed to spring that news on the world, that's where it happened. Because it was safe there. But I remember this day where, background. And a few students yesterday, particularly in mythology, had heard of this. Back then, there was a video game out, and I'm not shaking my fist at video games much, Adam Wilder, but it was called World of Warcraft. And Adam, forgive me, it destroyed the lives of kids. I mean, it just did. I had parents calling me in tears. Parents at parent-teacher conference were just out of their minds over the fact that their kids weren't even sleeping. They played this game day and night. And it had 80 levels until we got to the expansion pack. And World of Warcraft was really did some harm. But I remember this day where we were all just hanging out, just a regular day, and this kid named Blaine Fleener told us the story that weekend he'd gone to the mall in St. Cloud to hang out with kids that he was playing World of Warcraft with online. Cooper Lund went completely out of his mind. He was like he broke some kind of rule. He crossed this line between what I think Cooper clearly thought should demarcate our virtual world and our analog world. And I remember Cooper with his long hair jumping around the office, gesticulating, freaking out, really yelling at Blaine, who he loved. Told him not to do that anymore. And to say the obvious, that I've said this before, I love the digital world, I love the digital life, I love my digital amplifier, my digital music collection, but as successful as the poetry reading was yesterday, the balance, the out of whack, out of kilter balance between real life, analog life, as I think of it with that old-timey term, and virtual, it's just a little excessive at this point. So I've got comments on that. And here's what I got for you today. I discovered a Fred Marchand poem. Fred Marchand is a Grey Wolf poet. And I have a beautiful book here that I've just barely cracked, with all the books that I got with faculty development money, 87 books this past spring. And I'm just now beginning to look into this book for the telling of a tale. And I want to read I want to read a poem to you that I discovered 3 or 4 nights ago and kind of fell in love with. I got some comments on what the poetry reading was like for me. I can't do the usual thing like, what did you think if you went? We had a fantastic discussion about that poetry reading in my mythology class. My 10 o'clock people did pretty well too. And we'll get there when we get there. Also, in terms of straightforward teaching today, I want to talk to you for a little while today, carefully, respectfully. Ooh, it's actually going to be hard to be respectful, but let me see how I do. I can't talk about the lost generation writers without giving you a little bit of contextualization, some historical background. And you need to know a basic thing about these writers. They were definitely influenced by a philosophy that was extremely popular, that actually kind of goes back to the late 1700s, but was really spreading across Europe and the United States of America like a fire. It totally influenced them. I can prove it. I know it. And I'm going to argue that it did them harm, that it did their art harm. And it might have, it's definitely still doing harm to people. If you're me, when I get to talking about existentialism, you might go, wow, I like the sound of that. And that's great. That's what college is like. You pick up a way of thinking, a value, a worldview, and you want to make it yours. That's great. We can still be friends. I can't overstate how bleak I think that outlook is, that view of reality. I don't buy it, but I got to talk about it because it's part of teaching. I also got some really crappy drawings here that I actually have made notes on, and I'll explain that later. We got to do a little bit of literary theory and criticism today. Lit Crit 101, as I call it. I'm not a literary theorist. I'm a literature guy, but I'm not big. I don't know a lot about lit theory. I was obligated to take one class on it in graduate school, and it'll help you understand literature, how it works. And we'll end with some music today, but I got to begin with a poem and an observation. The Buddha never wrote anything. Homer never wrote anything. Jesus, who's maybe a mythology to you or just a literary figure, who's real to me, he never wrote a word that we know of, except once. And if you know that story, I think about this a lot. It's just this regular day where Jesus is just kind of hanging out and relaxing, or at least that's how I imagine it. And I think some people come along, maybe Pharisees, maybe scribes, and they've got a woman that they've caught in adultery. And they're always trying to trick him, right? For 3 years they try to trick him, and every time his pushback is perfect because he was a genius. And eventually they said, we have got to kill this guy. And they did. But they bring this woman and they say, she's been caught in adultery. What do we do? And you know what happens? Jesus kneels down and starts with his finger, possibly writing in the sand, maybe drawing. I've often wondered what that was that he wrote. Some people think it's the names of the accusers. And if you know that story, you know that he stands up after a while and says, okay, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And they all walk, bit by bit. One by one, they peel away. Fred Marchand, here's our poem for today. Said, not said. It's kind of the title cut of the poem, if this were an album. The teacher. They bring before him a woman taken in adultery. He is asked, what is to be done? For by law, her head should be crushed by stones. Trick question, writes the evangelist. A ragged boy, watching from behind, backs, senses danger, while the teacher ignores the question utterly, as if he heard them not. The boy squeezes front to see the teacher bend down, and with his finger, push aside the sand, waiting for someone to pick up the first stone. The book says nothing as to what the teacher wrote in the sand, or if this was writing at all. Like the boy staring at what looked like chicken scratches, we are left to wonder at the spell the unsaid cast over them all. We feel unrelenting sunlight bearing down on the accusers. We may try to imagine what they are thinking, but they, convicted by their conscience, have begun to walk away and are saying nothing. I think that's quite a poem. And thank you for letting me read it. I'm looking down once in a while here because I've got my crap lesson plan duct taped to this tripod. I think it's a pretty cool little videographer move, but I guess that's just me. Allow me to repeat what I said to my students yesterday. There was a moment when I was gearing up to host U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo for the whole state of Minnesota. And you know what, we got 16 schools involved ultimately. 2 more came on at last minute, the Bug School and Deer River. And I love that we got all those books out to those indigenous kids across the state of Minnesota. But here's what I want to say. I picked up my phone at one point. Actually, I picked it up many times as the reading was coming on. And when it was 11:59, I had a moment where I really paused. Right, people are blipping in. Joy Harjo's ready to go, coming in from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had 2 videographer cats. Our genius videographer professor, Mark Ambrose, and his right-hand dude, Brent Balmer, were outside my office in the library at CLC. How happy I was to be back at my college in that office. I missed so much. And they were doing the Zoom stuff, so I could just relax and be the host. And I thought back across the last 8 years, 25 poetry readings. She was the 26th poet. And that moment for me has come again and again and again. 11:59. The readings always start at noon. And how different that moment was. Ordinarily, I'm in the Chalberg, it's 11:59, I've got 285 people tucked into their seats, I've got music, groovy music coming in through the clip speakers, I've got images, video sometimes going up on the big screen, and I'm always so excited because I'm getting ready to host a poetry reading. And bound up on that stage, offer the introduction and the applause and everything and the poet hug and Thursday afternoon at 11:59, it was nothing like that. I was just sitting there very quietly, getting ready to, in the same way that I'm trying to turn myself into an online teacher, trying to reinvent myself as a virtual poet host. And to the extent that it can work, if you saw it, I think it went okay. A lot of happy people. The vid has, I imagine thousands would watch, but really in the end it was several hundred people. I think 800 or so have seen the video at this point, the film of it. And boy, did I get a lot of pats on the back and happy people calling me, writing me, saying generally the same thing. We're stuck in a pandemic watching crap entertainment all the time. Thanks for going for it and providing a true arts experience for us. I got messages from people as far away as Berlin, Germany, or North Dakota, which certain days seems as far away as Germany to me. I was on Lakeland Public Television. I'll spare putting that clip up for you for a second time. And you know what? My heart was mostly in the comment. My heart was true when I told them I did it. We pulled it off. We created a community to the extent one can with an online reading. And I guess the main thing that I want to tell you before we get on to me actually teaching you something possibly, I want to let you know that when I get done having a poetry reading, one of my jobs is to deal with the correspondence and spin emails that come into my box from people all over. And I think that the year that this got most profound was the year 2014. That was the year I got a $68,000 grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. And that could buy a lot of poetry. 4 poets that year, spring and fall. And I remember that year getting, it happens every time. It happened this week. I'm still getting them. Emails from complete strangers, people I've never heard of, obviously. And I'm thinking back to 2014, and I got an email from a woman in Nashville. She wanted me to read her poems. She had lost a friend of hers, and she was wild with grief. And the poems weren't very good, but it felt really superstitious to ignore the poetry. So I read the poems and sent her back comments on about a few lines and an image or two that I found admirable. And I wasn't lying about that. That same year, a musician who's going to be our outro today, a young man named Brian Laidlaw wrote me. Super excited email from this young man from Minneapolis. Told me who he was, English major, musician, poet. Told me that he at the time was teaching music, teaching songwriting at the MacPhail Music Center in Minneapolis. His name was Brian Laidlaw. And he was asking me if he could warm up U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Hass in the Chalberg. He told me he would do it for free. And when I read that, sometimes I'm so petty and small, it's just embarrassing. When I read that email, it was in this glass porch too. And the table was over there then. I read that email and I thought, I need a folk singer warming up a great American poet like I need a hole in the head. Well, then I Googled him a little bit to see who he was. He's the real deal, you guys. Give the video that I put up at the end at least a minute or two. I fell in love with his music. I figured out that he was about to, he's got a PhD at this point. This is 6 years ago. And I wrote him back and I said, you're the real deal. You are going to warm up Robert Hass. And not only that, you're going to come and stay at my house. Let's be friends. You can stay in the basement. Robert Hass will be in the guest house. We're doing this. And not only that, you're going to have dinner with Robert Hass, and I'm going to put you directly across from him in this glass porch with the feast that's going to feed 14 people. He was so excited. My wife was not. She freaked out. She's like, you just invited a total stranger to our home? I don't know. I said, trust me this time out. I love this guy. We're already friends. And there was this fantastic moment. I always leave my house open because if you live in the middle of nowhere, why lock it, right? Nobody's going to hear the burglars breaking in. They never do. They haven't in a while. So I left the house open. I remember pulling up, and he was sitting at my kitchen table with this $2,000 American steel guitar, like all steel, the body and everything. And he was plunking away, and our friendship began with a hug. And there were people that enjoyed him more than Robert Hass. I later had him come back for something I called the Wandering Troubadours concert. I had a music event with my Verse Like Water thing. I got an email from Duluth. I didn't know there was an Indian Native American housing project up there. I guess there were 40, 50 people in a room watching it overlooking the Big Lake. And I'm almost done with this segment. The last thing I want to tell you is that when I got done with the poetry reading, you know, got all the pats on the back, which I do not need at this point. And I was fixing to take the last box and a half of books to the mailroom because I'd promised them to a number of faculty and colleagues, faculty and staff at Central Lakes College. Literally, I don't use that word very often, just as I was getting up to pick up the books and trying to figure whether or not I should carry them or use a cart, an email came in from a guy named Terry O'Neill up by Grand Rapids, who apparently ran the annual Arrowhead storytelling contest, Terry O'Neill. He told me that the reading was fantastic, and he also gently let me know that there were a couple of schools up there that would have liked to have been involved, and a little wave of grief came over me. That was not a hard choice to make. I sent out an email to everybody at the college and said, look, I promised you a book. Sorry, I'm going to Thad Weaver's mailroom right now, and we're shipping these books UPS to Deer River to get them into the hands of kids. And at that point, I was able to let the books go. But not before I put 15 of them aside for my honors lit class this spring. I hope you watched at least some of the reading so you can understand me and maybe understand what I've been up to for the last few weeks instead of reading student writing, which I know I keep saying I'll get back to that, but I will now because I get my life back. I want to talk a little bit about literary theory and the act of reading. And I'll talk about it the same way that I talked about it on yesterday morning. And I'm sorry I got notes on my thing here. I don't know if you can see this. I wrote Sheena because I have a student who is very serious about getting into dental school. And I'll do this with any of you. She's writing a very important scholarship application essay, and she wanted me to read it. So just ignore the bottom half in black ink and concentrate on the red. And we had a meeting at 10:30, and then we just met at 3 o'clock to make sure that essay sings the song she wants. So anyway, I put this up in front of, I got to get it near my head, I think, so it focuses on it. I asked my students yesterday morning, okay, I want you to think about, as we usually think about, writers and readers and the relationship between them. Again, sorry about the crap drawing. Lighting changes a little bit when I do that. But yesterday, we don't need this up much longer. I asked all my students, what is this in the middle? Maybe you can guess from wherever you are. What is this? And one kid said, a pizza. I've never heard that. Another kid said something I've heard before, a diamond. And I said, wrong, close but no guitar. And then I told him that the stoner kid I had years ago, who I love dearly, Dylan McFarlane, who was always high. He took a look at that one day when he was 15 years old. He said, is that a portal to another dimension? I said, on good days, maybe, Dylan. Put the bong down. Now, Here's a way of thinking about this. I just got an email from somebody who wanted to hand in the persuasive paper late. Don't worry about that. Everybody's passing with me, okay? So just relax right now about that. It's a pandemic, okay? That doesn't mean A's for everyone, but everybody's passing my courses this semester. But whoever wrote that email to me, just to use an example from Riverland, oh, can I still get credit for this? That person who wrote that, and we'll see, was not pretending to be anything other than who they were. Right? And when I picked that up and read it, I was not pretending to be anything other than I was. It was a student, maybe a kid, writing to a middle-aged English major with a question. Now you need to have a basic understanding of this. That's not how literature works. With literature, what happens is the voice, the writer, the actual writer, in this case, for instance, let's be concrete. F. Scott Fitzgerald is actually sending forth an implied writer. That's a voice, right? And if they can't do that, we've talked about this before, the idea of a persona, the idea of a mask. We don't have literature. We simply don't have literature. Every writer would only have one book. So obviously Nick Carraway is the implied writer. That's the voice. Fitzgerald's hanging back, right? It's not like it's make-believe. It's not like it's a puppet show. This is how art works. Fitzgerald dispatches Nick, and it's Nick on the first page who is talking to you. And similarly, Mark Twain is not who you encounter exactly when you pick up Huckleberry Finn, our greatest novel. You are reading Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn is the implied writer, Twain's the writer, and he's sort of putting words in his mouth. To me, it is an absolutely endlessly intriguing game to try to figure out where the writer leaves off and the implied writer picks up. Students are always a little bit weirded out by the idea when I have to try to... Everybody can get this. Everybody knows this. But you too send forth an implied reader. That's kind of you and kind of not you at the same time. We're going to build on this and make this a little bit more sophisticated and complicated later. It won't be hard though. You send forth an implied reader, right? Like you could pick up a book one day and have a headache. And the next day, you could pick up the book again, and it might be a completely different experience for you. I've got a very sweet student who always beams in early on Zoom, Clayton Pyle. He's in my 10 o'clock Zoom class, and he wrote me an email this week, a thoughtful one, with a good question. He said, Johnson, some of us read The Great Gatsby last year at Brainerd High School. We watched the movie, too. What's your advice? Should I read it again? Well, I answered him with one answer, saying, you know, I think it's a great gift to reapproach a great work of literature. But when we were going live Zoom, Clayton was there, right? So he could be the example. And I said, okay, Clayton, how long ago did you read The Great Gatsby? And he said about 6 months. And I had to tell him something that he already knew, but I had to kind of flesh it out a little bit. And then I teased him. I said, you know, Clayton, that's you 6 months ago. It's you. And it's the same you that today woke up and looked in the mirror and said, well, there I am. Here I am. But I argued to Clayton very gently that we are all a succession of selves. And the Clayton that picks it up and possibly reads it now for a quiz that is for real. I got to tell that to you too. If you think you can get by read crappy plot summary on the internet, don't do that. The test will. No, don't worry. I said, Clayton, you don't want to pick it up now in the future to survive that quiz. You might want to pick it up because you're a different man now. And 10 years from now, you're going to pick it up and it would be different again. I used to cheer for Jay Gatsby when I was a young man. Not anymore. And Clayton, 40 years from now, the experience would be very different. And then I freaked him out. I said, Clayton, 40 years from now, you're going to be a fat guy on a beach with hair on your back. And his eyes got wide, even thinking about it. And I changed it. I gave him a completely different destiny. I said, wait. I'm wrong. You're going to look fantastic. You're going to have all your hair. You're going to have a home gym in your beautiful basement on a lake. And you're going to be ripped. You're going to look fantastic at the age of 58. Don't worry about it. Then he smiled. He liked that fate better. So we will come back to this. And it's dead simple. Writers send forth implied writers, we send forth implied readers, and the meaning comes somewhere between us and that text. And that's the thing we've got to talk about next. Where does meaning reside? In the mind of the writer? Mind of the reader? Probably more likely somewhere in between. And I'll end at least my part of our class today by talking about something that's not easy. And again, we get to believe different things. We have a pact. Even at this distance, with me just kind of throwing a feather into the canyon again with these videos, I'm just trying to make as good as I can. We're going to believe different things, we're going to value different things, and we're going to love and respect each other through the differences. So I'm going to talk about a philosophy right now that I don't like very much. And you might. And you might go and buy books that are existentialist, and that's fine too. Let's just cut to it. We have a philosopher at our college. I don't think I've discussed this with her. She's young. Her name is Sarah Kath, and I should ask Professor Kath what her take is on the Enlightenment of 1789 that I really skewer in my Intro to the Humanities class in the spring. You can take that, by the way. It's online. Wait, I'm a Riverland agent. I cannot pitch for another college. Strike that I said that. I'm an agent of both. I'm a co-agent of both. Let me put it this way. In 1789, France, a country that used to be the most devoutly Catholic in the world, went through a little thing called the French Revolution. And a lot of people died. And a lot of people in that country began to look away from heaven. And that's been happening ever since. You've heard me think in this way before, and that is why I think we are in the definitive moment right now that we are inhabiting, with the virus getting angry and epic events happening. But we move through the 1800s, and that idea that there is no God really took a hold. And that idea is still spinning out of control. Some of you might have heard of Karl Marx, who, for instance, as a friend of Hegel, decided that religion is the opiate of the masses. It's just a drug, man, making us stupid and addicted. We have Friedrich Nietzsche, a really brilliant guy with one of the most spectacular mustaches in the history of history. Comes along and writes some pretty wild books, including Thus Spake Zarathustra, which I have attempted and put down for good. Schopenhauer too, but it is famously Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe around 1899, proclaimed to the world, God is dead and he will remain dead. And this was really seriously ramped up by a French philosopher named Jean-Paul Sartre, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature and then said, no thanks, I don't want your bourgeoisie money. How's that for rude? Turned down the prize. Really one of the most influential people of the 20th century, still influential. And I just have to simply say this. Existentialism, and Jean-Paul Sartre, especially his 1925 book, A Defense of Existentialism, absolutely influenced William Faulkner, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and most profoundly Ernest Hemingway. They all read that book. It affected their lives, it affected their worldview, along with the horrors that they had seen in World War I. And it really set a fire in Hemingway's head. If you want to pick up a bleak short story, read the Snows of Kilimanjaro. That is so sad and hopeless that I don't teach that story anymore. I'm through with it. I'm just through. I love Hemingway. I've forgiven him so many things, but I'm done with that story. The rules of existentialism are relatively simple. Again, they might appeal to you. There's no God. Death is final. That's it. We are all, for an existentialist, thrown into an absurd world freely to make our own decisions. But, according to Sartre, if there's no God, there's no rules, there's no morals. An existentialist believes that nothing has any meaning until we give it meaning, right? An existentialist determines their own code of behavior. They don't follow the rules of the world. There's no one paying attention to us. We're not being watched like I'm convinced we are. If you dig that, go get A Defense of Existentialism. You can read that book. It's not that hard. Maybe that sings a song whose notes you appreciate. I can't live like that. I refuse to live like that. To think that life has no meaning? That's just a bunch of... Did I almost swear in a YouTube video? No. Hey, in my office for just a second, just to properly introduce my friend Brian Laidlaw. I'm not young and cool anymore, but I have friends who are. Watch.
There will be nights when you feel like charcoal, nights when you feel like a diamond in the mine. There will be nights when your elements sparkle, and nights when you sleep just fine. There will be nights when you're clear as a river, nights when your eyelids overflow with brine. There will be nights when you stay up and shiver, and nights when you sleep just fine. When your dreams are like hymns, but you don't know who sung them. There will be nights when the stars appear dim, but you know you're among them. You know you are one of them. There will be nights when the moon looks dimmer, nights when the moon has forgotten how to shine. There will be nights when your dark sides glimmer, and nights when you sleep just fine. There will be nights when you sink through the stratum, nights when you feel you're ready to resign. There will be nights when we split like an atom, nights when we sleep just fine. There will be nights when your dreams are like hymns, but you don't know who sung them. There will be nights when the stars appear dim, but you know you're a